For those of you like me who happen to find themselves desperately entrenched in the world of Myers-Briggs in an effort to understand themselves and others, here is my answer to that partially age-old question: why do INTPs get so much hate? Mental autonomy and the whim of speculation is the fire of an INTP. They are silent and heady visionaries who often opt out of the need for conventional stimulations. They are explorers, and once you've lost their interest, there's not a whole lot you can do. A caveat to this notion is the open-ended question as to whether INTPs ever fully exile a set of phenomena, as the action would not jive with their spirit of infinite play, in which, you guessed it, the children of logic dance. On returning to the subject, they will invariably have rotated their minds in the flowering of a postulate. The life of the mind INTPs find intoxicating, whereas others are mystified by a virtuosity which they see only in glimpses, which simmers, percolates, and interrelates, hovers around the periphery of a concrete form, but never seems to address the grave themes of closure. INTPs excel at unsupervised research. Telling one that he's asking too many questions, for example, seems inane, heartless, and illogical to him, as the inquisitive baseline and inquiring thereof is a hallmark trait ventured by all logicians, and their sense of integrity is attached to it. My argument, you understand. A vicious curiosity trips them round all to anon, spinning magic cartwheels to new conceptual cloud nines. And this is why ordinary algorithms of behavior prediction simply don't apply to this type. Passionate, rigorously analytical people who are able to make their own way home in life, ladies and gentlemen. INTPs sardonically and merrily address the rainbows of their own uncertainties every morning and start with a fresh look that follows their wandering attention. This makes INTPs beguiling in their spontaneity, and this is exactly why people who are fed to the rules may occasionally try to control the fluttering mirage of a situation known as the INTP. P.S. Keep trucking. An INTP is the kind of person who wants to make a holographic picture of symbolic truths underlying various theories of mind, tie the new knowledge into an eclectic bouquet, and then pass it on to the ex-NTJs who find a practical conversion for the data and spearhead a psychological revolution in self-sufficiency. But vested interests of the status quo don't abide this sort of enterprise. It is a sheer penchant for logical integrity and the dual ecstasy of ideas as playthings that baffles, stupefies, and enrages those who yearn for unshakable matrices and an absolute significance that permeates irresistibly up and down in striations of rigid inevitability, classification, established order, and dogma, thereby assisting a just so worldview in the abstract shape of an institution. It's the INTP's bent to leave externalities alone and prefer the contemplative life that makes him appear useless to a superficial observer. Emphasis on the word superficial. The INTP simply finds unpalatable, and far more than only unnecessary and superfluous, but actually dangerous, all of the usual run-of-the-mill illusions about values, hierarchies, and conventional modalities of living that pretend toward the one and only game in town. To question the nature thereof is to court the freewheeling. So those who stand still are lost in the zigzag of the INTP, and with a loss at interpretation, utter the trite sequences of low-hanging fruit, bouncing from cliché to cliché, as if the rock of ages could dissuade the hammer which rebels against it. The real reason why INTPs cause irritation is because they are inscrutable as a matter of course. Ambiguity for the logician is an organic extension of trifurcating pursuits, category-dissolving switches, and a flexible perceiving temperament. But it can also be employed as a cloaking device to gauge company when harvesting data. Audiences do not understand the insatiable appetite for paradox. Heedlessly precise in communication, yet seamless and tangential in the thinking process, creating an esoteric mixture. These eccentric contradictions aren't perceived as anything except a frivolous dance to those who do not hear the musical orchestrations of a consciousness that never sleeps. The INTP roundabout coherence and lust for ideas seem mighty suspicious to any figures in authority, whose agendas are called into question by a zany breadth of inquiry that has a life all its own, projecting alien creatures into the mind's eye of all familiar caves. You see, the iconoclasts are the future, but futures are born in the mind. The kind of privacy required to bring out a delicate baby of novel creation is sometimes despised because it cannot be touched, insofar as the individual remains true to the secret. But to an INTP, the ability to keep a secret is a fundamental component of agency. An inclination for privacy contributes to the enigma, and those who haven't examined their own interior tend to be apprehensive about an unreachable stone, especially if they feel attached to, drumroll please, the flashiness of modernity. For an INTP, it's irrational to hate what you can't control. The independence of an INTP is a reflection and living proof of why cultural expectations are meaningless in the first place, or, at least, carry serious limitations of a consensus reality. For an INTP seeks no appropriation dogmas or cults of visibility, and grants them no recognition as a value in life, except as being the calculated debris in a primordially hypnotic raffle. The INTP is hated because he's immune to hype, seeing it as the vacuum that it is. Predators aim at impenetrable strength in order to make it weakness, but often from a sense of envy. This is why some people may attempt to rule the INTP, because deep down they sense the intransigence of a convicted autonomy, knowing a proud logician would take his own life before surrendering the creative contours of life methodology, what to do with his mind, and where to stretch the horizons of his imagination. Insofar as INTPs elicit actual hatred, it's because the power of their individuality is too strong, instinctual, and untouchable. Nothing like self-trust. The worlds of contingency and eternity spar, but via the territorial imperatives of the demands made by habits of information processing. This is a useful way of delineating wars on perception, which exist insofar as the architectures of minds long to assert themselves. All haters share one thing in common. which is the aim of breaking open their targets in an attempt to innervate and disturb them by installing new idols. But the rhetorical flippancy of logicians, combined with their ease in the observer role, draws into question the metaphysics of living for outward success and the identity dramas which often follow on the coattails of an ostensible professionalism. For INTPs inhabit a realm that is not of the marketplace. Since that kind of domination and pursuit to strip autonomy is so alien to the thinking of the INTP, it is precisely for this reason that they tend to be the greatest random victims of it. The innocence of the free is held in contempt and resentment by those who feel tied to the expectations of others. It's as simple as that. The INTP does not have an attraction, but a disdain for conformity. And it's exactly this trait which maddens those who want to compress all of life into neat, pre-packaged little boxes. Commercial, please. For this logician personally, conformity has been a bit of a ghost in the machine. That is, am I hallucinating my obsession, or merely suffering from an acute pattern detection apparatus that manifold palpates its effects? But the moment life is reduced to a caricature, its chief aspects become either incommunicable or meaningless. The INTP is acutely aware that much is lost in translation between transferences of symbolic analyses referring to experiential data. This is why logic essentially operates as a razor when the math isn't right. Nothing in this world is like the beauty of an INTP in his or her own stride, rising towards the nexus of all possible mysteries. All possible, ladies and gentlemen. The knowledge of all things is possible, Leonardo da Vinci. For an INTP with a vivid imagination, it's easy to feel like a god. The ability to use one's intuition to sculpt an intricate language of fantasy and deduction is often a recipe for the burgeoning of a silent, brimming confidence, which can be daunting for less self-contained types. INTPs find the universe insanely interesting, and may from time to time pass as schizophrenic or some less ignorant thing, simply because they are lost in the wonder of it all. Just like that Beatles song. This can lead to many permutations of isolation. INTPs are in no rush to classify unknowables, nor to reinforce old knowledge. They get high on the mystery of it all, and wonder why you don't, too. Those who hate us want to break up our private party, but as the poet Ezra Pound once articulated, to the hurrah of all private people, I dare say and imagine, the temple is holy because it is not for sale. I think being an INTP is wonderful. It's a tormenting and often lonely path, but it's a life full of sublime observations and rich, fertile thought. I wish more people understood us. But then again, being a loner has its perks.